What if the greatest alien discovery wasn't a spaceship, but a heartbeat? She came from a distant world, cold, calculated, sent only to study. But here, under a sky of unfamiliar stars, she didn't collect samples. She learned how to kneel in soil. She watched a man fix a fence. She asked about love and didn't understand the ache in her chest. This is not a story about alien invasion. It's about what happens when intelligence meets intimacy. When data isn't enough. When logic trembles before a simple touch. And when the most foreign life form becomes the one inside you. So ask yourself, if an alien chose to stay not to observe, but to feel, would we still call her other? It began on a night that was too quiet, not like peace, but like pressure before a storm. Liam was no stranger to solitude. His farm, tucked deep in the Appalachian hills, had known decades of wind, crop, and the occasional howl of coyotes. But this night, the silence held a density that made the lungs work harder, as if the air itself was listening. The cicadas had stopped. No owl called. Even the wind avoided his porch. It was the kind of stillness that made old dogs whimper in their sleep. He stood alone, mug in hand, staring into the blackness of the tree line, when it came. A hum. Not heard with ears, but felt. Deep, low, and patient, as if something under the ground had awakened and was stretching for the first time in eons. The wooden porch vibrated faintly beneath his boots, not rattling, not shaking, but pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. At first, he thought it was the water heater or an electrical wire buried too shallow. But then the cattle in the pasture began to shuffle nervously, their heads all turning west. A moment later, the rooster crowed at midnight. This was not normal. Not mechanical. This was alive. Liam stepped off the porch. The gravel beneath his feet buzzed with a subtle frequency, like a deep subwoofer from a concert 3 towns away. But there was no sound in the sky, no aircraft, no storm. Just the vibration. The night was moonless, but the stars, God, the stars were blazing. More of them than he remembered, like a million eyes staring back. He walked down the path leading toward the western field. The wind was returning now, but in strange directions. It didn't push his clothes like a breeze, it curled around him, like fingers brushing past his shoulders. As he reached the fence, he stopped. On the hill opposite, the earth bloomed in sudden blue. Not a flash. A glow. Like the land had opened a secret vein and spilled its own light. The blue was electric but soft, not blinding. It illuminated the edges of the trees, casting long, reaching shadows across the wheat. And then the hum changed pitch. It dropped half a tone, deep enough to make Liam's sternum resonate. That's when I knew, I say I because I've studied this pattern before. This frequency, this pattern of blue illumination and ground-borne resonance, matches at least 6 known UFO incident clusters: Skinwalker Ranch, the Siberian hums, and the Chilean subfield cases from 1989. The commonality? All began with ground phenomena, not skyborne light. The alien doesn't arrive from above. It emerges from below as if waiting for the soil to forget it. The field in front of Liam rippled not visibly, but gravitationally. He didn't see it so much as feel it warp. Then came the sound of displacement, not air but presence. As if the space around him had been folded and reassembled. A shape appeared in the glow, a vessel, unlike any military aircraft I've seen or catalogued. It did not land. It hovered 2 feet above the earth, humming with quiet intent. Its surface shimmered like mercury under pressure, undulating in microscopic waves, yet perfectly still overall. Not even a breeze moved the grass beneath it. A ramp extended from the vessel with no sound, no mechanism. It simply existed outward. And at its apex, a figure stood. Here is where most contact cases diverge into the fantastical or the hysterical. But Liam's experience, like a few others I've investigated, including a 1977 Arkansas Farmer's Journal that never went public, remains strangely serene. The being that stepped forward was humanoid, tall, and carried the presence of someone who had never known fear. Long silver hair floated around her head like it existed in a thinner atmosphere. Her body seemed clothed in living metal, an adaptive sheath that shimmered in sync with her movements. Eyes large and violet, glowing faintly, and scanning not for threat but for meaning. She did not speak at first. She observed. Her eyes flicked to the soil, the boots, the mug still steaming in Liam's trembling hand. And then, with a voice that sounded like it was designed for diplomacy, she said one word. Human. It was not a question. It was an affirmation. A recognition. Then she tilted her head and said, "This ground remembers. That is why I came." What does that mean? That is not a line pulled from fiction. It is reported in several CE5 cases that alien entities do not only observe humans, but the land around them. As if the Earth is part of the message. In those same cases, witnesses have reported inexplicable memories surfacing from childhood or ancestral lineage, as if the contact awakens something in them, too. Liam took a step back. But not out of fear. He later described it as an involuntary retreat, a biological reflex before something your soul hasn't classified yet. I felt, he said in an unpublished statement, like I was standing in front of time itself. I believe him. And as the figure descended the ramp, the hum faded. Not into silence but into him. The frequency remained in his bones for hours afterward, even after she spoke again. I am here, she said, because your planet has begun to tremble in its sleep. We wish to understand why. That was all it took to alter everything he thought he knew about the world. Because what do you say when something not of this earth asks why your earth is crying in the dark? And that night, with the fields still glowing faintly and the cattle watching silently from afar, Liam did not run. He stepped forward. Toward the vibration. Toward her. Toward the shift. She descended not like a soldier, nor like an emissary of war, but like something born from the rhythm of light itself. The ramp from the vessel made no sound, no hiss of hydraulics, no mechanical groan. It extended as if answering a silent command from gravity's inverse weightlessness applied with intention. And she stood there, motionless at first, her silhouette outlined by the soft, bluish sheen of the vessel behind her, a figure carved from both logic and dream. Her form was unmistakably feminine, tall, symmetrical, yet fluid like mist wrapped in starlight. The silver membrane covering her body didn't move with her, it anticipated her movement, like a second skin thinking just slightly faster than muscle. Her hair, if it could be called that, floated in slow motion arcs, unaffected by breeze or physics, responding instead to something else, perhaps the electrostatic charge in the air. Every step she took down that ramp was like a soft note in an unknown musical scale. Not rehearsed. Not random. Just, true. Liam did not speak. He could not. His throat held a kind of ancestral tightness, the same one ancient humans must have felt when encountering fire for the first time, awed, afraid, seduced. This wasn't fear of death, but fear of magnitude, a quiet panic in the face of something that rewrites meaning itself. She stopped 5 feet in front of him, and the air changed. Denser. Warmer at the edges. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears, and yet nothing else stirred, no wind, no crickets, not even the creak of the trees behind him. And then, with a voice that bypassed air and pierced comprehension directly, she spoke. "You are Liam." Not a question. Not a guess. A certainty so profound it felt like she'd known the name before he was born. Liam opened his mouth to respond, but words felt like clumsy instruments now. She didn't need language, yet she used it. For him. "I am Vórah," she said, with an inflection untranslatable. The name didn't land in the ears, it landed in the chest. "We have observed the tremors. Your soil is speaking." There is a recurring theme in ancient contact cases, particularly those from early Cold War military files that remain unpublished outside certain black-budget circles, wherein the female extraterrestrial archetype appears not as a warrior or a seductress, but as a kind of mythic interface, a bridge between cognition and phenomena. The woman of light has often emerged in visions during moments of electromagnetic disturbance, crop resonance, or seismic frequency anomalies. What these accounts share is the impression that these beings do not arrive to rule, but to reflect, to cast back at us the questions we've buried beneath fear, shame, and cultural noise. Vórah took another step forward. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and colored like ultraviolet flames, studied him, not as a specimen, but as a mirror. When her gaze met his, Liam said he felt like she was scanning not his body, but his privacy. The thoughts he didn't dare name. The things he never told even himself. And still there was no malice in her. Only gravity. "What are you?" Liam finally whispered. Her response came not with pride, but with precision. "A collector of reverberations. Your kind stores memory in emotion. We collect what you suppress." She was not here for metal or minerals. She was here for the buried. The unspoken. The frequencies of fear, lust, wonder, denial, things humans hide even from God. This is the moment I find most important, not as a researcher, but as a human. The alien woman archetype, especially when rendered with softness rather than domination, functions not just as the other, but as the internal made external. We see in her the embodiment of what we've lost control over: truth, the ability to be seen without shame, a knowledge system not reduced to binary logic but widened by paradox. Vórah's presence unsettled Liam, not because she was unknown, but because she knew. She circled him, slowly, reverently. Her feet never quite touched the earth. And when she came full circle, she spoke again. "Why do you fear the parts of yourself you cannot name?" Liam recoiled, not in anger but in confusion. He wasn't ready to answer. And that, I believe, is the entire premise of her visit. The blue glow from the ship began to dim, retracting into the craft center like a breathing lung slowing its inhale. Behind her, the sky was cloudless, but the stars had changed somehow, closer, sharper. Or perhaps his perception had simply been elevated. Liam stood rooted, his boots now heavy as stone. Then came the question that would define the shape of everything that followed. A question that, in its alien innocence, struck deeper than any insult, any probe, any act of domination ever could. "Human," she said, tilting her head ever so slightly, "what is this hard thing that hangs between your legs? Is it for protection? Is it a weapon? May I touch it?" Silence. A silence so thick, so implosive, that even the stars seemed to lean in. And here, my dear listener, is the brilliance of this story. What she asked was not vulgar. It was clinical, curious, vulnerable. But for Liam and for any of us raised within the scaffolding of modesty, taboo, and cultural censorship, it was a direct assault on a forbidden sanctum. She had, in one breath, bypassed every defense and landed her question squarely into the pit of human shame. This is what makes her terrifying, not her power, not her presence, but her complete lack of our conditioning. To her, the body was data. Curiosity was sacred. And boundaries were not laws but mysteries to be understood. Liam stammered, humiliated by a question that had no malicious intent. He tried to explain, clumsily, that some things on Earth are private. That humans feel about their bodies in ways that transcend function. That we are not made for open study, especially about the things we associate with identity, masculinity, reproduction, guilt. But Rihanna only listened. And then, with a serenity that felt ancient, she said, "On my world, nothing is hidden. Knowledge is sacred. Secrets are illness." It was not an argument. It was a thesis. A cultural divide carved by eons of divergence. Where Earthlings construct entire mythologies around concealment, her kind dissects, preserves, archives even the most intimate questions because to not ask is to stall evolution. This moment changed Liam. It was not the embarrassment that lingered, it was the mirror. The realization that the alien in front of him was not trying to shame him. She was inviting him to unravel. And perhaps, in that unraveling, he would find not just what makes him a man but what makes him human. The silence between the question and the answer was longer than it had any right to be. Not because Liam didn't have words, but because language itself had collapsed under the weight of cultural collision. He stared at her not with anger, not even with confusion, but with a dawning recognition that this moment would split the old world from the new. This wasn't just about anatomy. It was about exposure. Not physical exposure, but psychological nakedness, the kind that cultures have spent centuries teaching their children to avoid. Rihanna didn't move. She stood with her hands at her sides, her expression free of judgment. There was no smirk, no feigned innocence. Her question was not rhetorical, nor was it laced with mischief. It was sincere, surgical. A precise incision through layers of social skin, aimed not at provocation but revelation. "What is it for?" she repeated, her tone identical. "That protrusion. Is it a biological defense? A sensory device? A reproductive instrument? Or something else entirely?" And here is where the human psyche recoils, not because we don't know the answer, but because we do, and yet are trained to not speak it plainly. The body, in many cultures, especially male bodies, is a paradox. It is both power and shame. Function and taboo. Revered in sculpture, hidden in conversation. Celebrated in conquest, silenced in vulnerability. Liam's face flushed crimson, a surge of instinctual discomfort climbing his spine. His hands instinctively shielded the very region in question, as if protecting a sacred code not meant for decoding. "You can't just ask that," he muttered, his voice lower than it had ever been. "Why not?" she asked again. Not in defiance, but in pure, disarming curiosity. And in that question lies one of the deepest splits between Earth and whatever realm birthed Rihanna's mind. On her world, truth had no filters. Inquiry was not aggressive, it was considered reverent. To ask was to honor. To hide was to distort. As a lifelong researcher, I've interviewed nearly a dozen abductees who described similar moments, unearthly beings observing or interacting with parts of the human body that society deems off limits. In the 1961 case of Betty and Barney Hill, Barney described a being staring at his groin area, communicating telepathically something along the lines of "We do not understand this." And later, Betty described a needle inserted into her navel supposedly to extract reproductive information. These are not isolated anomalies. They point to a pattern. Extraterrestrial curiosity is fixated on what humans most protect, not just physically, but symbolically. Liam backed away a step, voice rising slightly. That's private. We don't talk about that. Not with strangers. Not like that. Rihanna tilted her head. Private. She spoke the word slowly, tasting its shape. What is the evolutionary function of secrecy? He was stunned. He had never thought of privacy as a function. He only knew it as law. As armor. As invisible fabric that kept society intact. It's respect, he said finally. It's decency. But what is hidden, she said gently, is often what holds the most relevance. Why would a species hide its generative core? Liam struggled. Not with the answer, but with the realization that he didn't have one. And perhaps none of us do. Perhaps shame is inherited, not from biology but from story. From whispered warnings and veiled punishments. From pulpits and classrooms. From the unspoken code that says some questions are too raw for daylight. And yet here was a being who had crossed light years not to steal, not to conquer but to ask. And her question, however disarming, was not an invasion. It was an invitation to self-reckon. I'm not comfortable, Liam said, more to himself than to her. I do not wish to cause discomfort, she replied. But I wish to understand what your people fear most, because that is where your meaning resides. She stepped back, just slightly, as if giving space was a gesture learned in this moment. Her violet eyes, still calm, did not flinch. They simply watched. I will not ask again, she said. But I will wonder. And in that single sentence, she laid bare a cosmic chasm. Humans, for all their data, distrust directness. We create myths to explain what we dare not name. We enshrine biology in ritual, in metaphor, in art, but rarely in honesty. And so the alien, in her innocence, becomes our accuser, not because she condemns us, but because she reflects us, without distortion. This, to me, is the power of the encounter, not the lights, not the craft, not even the interstellar language. It is the confrontation with our own limitations. Rihanna's presence forces the question, if truth makes us flinch, are we truly ready for contact? Near the end of that long moment, Liam did not answer. But something in him loosened. Not acceptance but awareness. And in awareness, the silence finally made sense. She wasn't here for sex. She wasn't here for data. She was here for the fault line. That invisible fracture where culture and biology meet. Where shame is born. And perhaps where healing begins. The door creaked when Liam pushed it open, not out of age, but out of familiarity. The sound wasn't broken, it was habitual, like an old friend clearing its throat before speaking. The air inside the farmhouse was warm, slightly musty from the wood stove that had gone cold hours ago. It smelled of fire ash, soil-stained denim, dried herbs hanging by the window, and something sweeter beneath, perhaps coffee grounds, or maybe the cinnamon sugar pie he had reheated earlier but hadn't eaten. It was the smell of continuity. Of a life lived without witnesses. Rihanna stepped through the threshold without hesitation, yet something about her shifted as soon as she entered. Her posture didn't change, but the way her eyes moved did. She looked slower now, not in speed, but in reverence. Her gaze roamed across the walls, lingering on objects she couldn't name, a rusty horseshoe nailed into the frame, a faded photo of Liam's parents holding a baby under a cottonwood tree, an antique clock whose ticking had stopped but still commanded attention like an elder that once ruled time. She walked as though each step risked altering something permanent. "This is yours," she said, not as a question, but as a deduction spoken aloud. Her voice was quieter now, not out of fear, but out of adjustment, as if the room itself asked her to whisper. Liam nodded, setting his mug on the weather-worn coffee table, its surface scratched from years of casual carelessness. "Yeah. Built it myself. Took me 5 years. Rihanna reached out to touch the wall, her fingers grazing the grain of the wood. The material responded with a faint creak, as if acknowledging her. She tilted her head. "It remembers." "What?" Liam asked. "This structure," she said slowly, "holds vibration. Heat. Breath. Echoes. You do not see them, but I do. Every corner, every scratch. This is not shelter. It is memory suspended in matter." Liam looked around his home, trying to see what she saw. To him, it was a space. To her it was a living record. "As a researcher, I've long believed that homes are the truest artifacts of human life, more than any written archive. In real alien contact cases, particularly the Travis Walton abduction, or the lesser-known 1984 Hooper, Colorado encounter, returning experiencers often describe a strange emotional dissonance when re-entering their homes. The walls feel thinner. The objects less theirs. It's as if the place had paused in time, but the person had moved beyond it. Contact changes what home means." Rihanna turned her attention to the mantel above the fireplace. On it sat 3 small frames. One was a black and white photo of a woman with strong eyes and dirt under her fingernails. Another, a child on a tricycle, Liam, probably 5 or 6. The last was a drawing done in crayons, yellow and green scribbles shaped like a sun and some sort of animal. She stared at them with absolute stillness. "Why do you encase your memories in rectangles?" she asked. Liam blinked. "You mean photos?" "Yes," she replied, not looking away. "These moments are flattened, imprisoned. Yet you display them with pride." He chuckled. "That's how we remember. That's how we keep people close." "But they are not here," she said. "Only the image remains. Why do you need the illusion?" "It's not illusion," he said, sitting down slowly. "It's tether. It reminds us of who we were. Where we came from." Rihanna stepped closer to the photographs. "On Vórah, we store memory in cells. Archived within us. Replayed internally. Nothing fades. Nothing decays." Liam exhaled. "That sounds like a burden." She turned toward him. "It is. Sometimes we envy the forgetting." That sentence hit him harder than it should have. He had spent years trying not to forget. Not his mother's voice, not the way his dog used to curl by the fire, not the crack in his father's boots. And yet, forgetting came anyway. Like rot in wood. Quiet. Inevitable. "I think," he said softly, "we frame things because we know they'll vanish." Rihanna sat across from him, her movement fluid, soundless. "And in freezing them, you build shrines." He nodded. "Yeah. I guess we do." They sat in silence for a while. Not the empty kind, but the kind that accumulates weight. The farmhouse didn't feel like just a place anymore. It felt like a container of ghosts, of sweat, of laughter between storms. And she felt it. Not through sentiment, but through structure. "Your world," she said at last, builds with fragility. Wood, cloth, glass. But your minds carve permanence into the impermanent. He looked at her. And yours. Our worlds are built from permanence. Crystalline memory. Bioresonant architecture. Nothing breaks. But we cannot forget. So nothing heals. That, I believe, is the most chilling insight she ever shared. In her honesty, she revealed the alien curse, immortality without grief. Memory without mercy. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's why she came not to study us, but to learn how to forget. How to hold something without encoding it forever. How to love knowing it won't last. Later that night, she walked the rooms of the house without speaking. She ran her hand along the bookshelf. She traced the rim of a chipped mug. She smelled a flannel jacket that hadn't been worn in months. And at one point, she sat by the window, watching the wind move the curtains like breath. When Liam passed her guest room to check if she needed anything, he saw her sitting on the bed, staring at the crayon drawing she had taken from the mantel. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with emotion, but with curiosity that had turned soft at the edges. He didn't say anything. He let her be. And in that silence, the wooden house dreamed new dreams. At dawn, the light that filtered into the kitchen was not golden, it was pale and slow, like a memory returning after too many years. The wood stove had been revived and filled the room with the scent of ash, iron, and the thick, greasy sweetness of fried bacon. Rihanna entered barefoot, her silver skin catching hints of reflection from the linoleum floor, her steps as quiet as breath, though Liam could sense her presence long before she appeared in the doorway. She sat down without invitation, not out of presumption, but from having already observed the rhythm of the household. The plate in front of her steamed with eggs and toast and bacon, and she examined it like one would a sacred relic. Her fingers hovered over the food, not to eat, but to feel the heat rising, the moisture curling off the surface, the texture that hinted at history. When she finally took a bite, her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes flickered. "This is decomposition," she said. Liam paused mid-chew. "Excuse me." She gestured at the bacon. "This matter was once alive. Now it is not. But in its breakdown, you create nourishment, flavor, comfort. You consume what decays." He leaned back slowly. "That's one way to put it. On Vórah," she continued, "we synthesize sustenance from stabilized protein fields. No death. No waste. No flavor." "Sounds efficient," Liam muttered, sipping his coffee. She nodded. "But also sterile. Our bodies are fed. Our senses are not." Then came the chore list. It started with feeding the pigs. Rihanna hesitated only slightly when Liam handed her a bucket of slop, its contents bubbling with fermented grain, vegetable scraps, and the pungent legacy of old banana skins. She held it like one would hold a sacred toxin. Her fingers twitched from the scent, but she didn't drop it. When the pigs came rushing toward the trough, all grunts and urgency and rolling flesh, she took a step back, not from fear, but awe. "They do not question the source," she said. "Nope," Liam replied, watching them devour. "They just eat." "Do they understand they consume death?" she asked. "I doubt they understand much of anything," he said. "They're just animals." "But you are animals too," she said, without insult. "And yet you mourn what you consume." That sentence stayed with him longer than he cared to admit. As they moved through the day, from gathering eggs to repairing the barn door, From clearing out chicken coops to trimming dead branches, Rihanna remained both participant and observer. She touched everything. The rusted hinges, the dusty feathers, the soil crusting under Liam's nails. Her curiosity was not casual, it was metaphysical. She paused in front of the compost pile, its surface alive with buzzing flies and the steam of microbial life. "This is beautiful," she said softly. Liam laughed, but stopped when he saw her expression. She was serious. "This," she whispered, "is transformation. From life, to rot, to nourishment again. The cycle is visible. It is honest." That, I believe, is where her understanding began to shift from data to reverence. From science to sacrament. As a researcher, I've long studied alien civilizations in fiction and contact lore that have evolved beyond the messiness of biological entropy. Think of the Vulcans, logical, detached, ordered. Think of the Borg, mechanized perfection at the cost of selfhood. These cultures purge chaos, and in doing so, often purge wonder. In their control, they lose contact with the smells, textures, and paradoxes of organic living. What Rihanna was encountering here was not just a different lifestyle, it was a forbidden luxury, the right to decay, to fail, to bleed meaning into the imperfect. There's a story in the unclassified sections of the Valiant Thor notes, an allegedly real extraterrestrial emissary who visited in the 1950s, where one of his companions became fixated by a wildflower growing between cracks of pavement. They studied it for hours, confused why such beauty was allowed to bloom in chaos, without intention or symmetry. That flower, they claimed, defied protocol. And perhaps that's what Earth offers the stars: not intellect, not weapons, not technology, but an architecture of imperfection that still births meaning. By mid-afternoon, Rihanna stood in the field, her feet buried in dirt, her hands stained green from weeding. She turned to Liam, her voice more grounded now. "I used to believe disorder was a failure of structure," she said. "Now I wonder if it is the origin of meaning itself." He looked at her, sweat on his brow, dirt on his arms. "It's both," he said. "Life's messy. So is meaning." She stared at the sky, where clouds were beginning to form, not in symmetrical rows, but in chaotic spirals that the wind stretched and tore. Her hair lifted slightly, silver strands catching the breeze like solar filaments. "I do not wish to return home with answers," she whispered. "I wish to return with questions." And in that moment, the field, the animals, the mud, the cracking wood of the fence, all of it became holy. It happened while he was fixing the fence, the wire too rusted, the post too warped, but still worth saving. The hammer struck wood in steady rhythm, tock, tock, crack, and Rihanna stood behind him, unmoving, her gaze locked on his hands. She didn't speak at first, nor did she seem to breathe. Her attention was so narrow, so absolute, that even the wind didn't dare interrupt it. When he paused to wipe the sweat from his brow, she stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, like approaching an artifact not meant to be touched. "May I see them?" she asked. He looked down, unsure what she meant at first, until she gestured to his hands. "Sure," he said, holding them out, palms up. She did not take them. She hovered over them, her fingers trembling just slightly. Her expression was not one of analysis, it was reverence. Like a pilgrim facing the remnants of a forgotten god. Then, gently, her fingers made contact, cool against calloused skin, tracing each crease as if reading scripture in a language only she understood. "These," she whispered, "are impossibilities." Liam tilted his head. "What?" "Your species," she said, still touching, creates with its body. You alter matter directly. You shape your environment not through mind or machine, but through flesh. You build. You destroy. You hold. You hurt. These appendages, they are both weapon and womb. Her words weren't poetic flattery. They were literal astonishment. Our kind, she continued, manipulates through resonance, through thought channeling, through programmed material. Nothing touches. Nothing scars. Nothing feels. Liam stared at his own hands now, suddenly aware of their history. The left pinky slightly bent from an old break. A crescent scar from barbed wire. The thick pads from years of farm work, from tools that bit and burned and became extensions of wool. These weren't just limbs. They were archives. And perhaps that's what she saw, not tools, but proof. Proof of survival. Of adaptation. Of meaning made manifest through effort. As a researcher, I've often wondered why alien contact reports so rarely speak of physical labor. Their ships appear, but are never built. Their devices function, but are never fixed. Their knowledge seems to flow, complete and sterile, untouched by process. No sweat. No mistake. And yet, when they observe us, they are drawn not to our intellect but to our struggle. To our hands. The one thing they seem incapable of replicating. Rihanna turned his hands over, palms down, her fingertips moving along the knuckles, the veins, the soil caught in the creases. These have shaped wood. Crushed fruit. Held warmth. Caused pain. Repaired broken things. No technology in our world contains such memory. He tried to laugh, but the weight of her words sank too deeply. They're just hands, he said. She looked at him, her eyes more vivid than usual, as if his words offended something sacred. To you, she said, they are ordinary. To us, they are rituals incarnate. Every motion, slow or rushed, gentle or violent, leaves an echo. Your tools are shaped to them. Your doors, your cups, your weapons, your lovers, all molded by these forms. Your entire civilization bends around their reach. He had never thought of it that way. And then came the silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but the heavy, sacred kind that appears only when two realities stand beside one another, unsure whether to clash or kneel. She sat down beside him, the old wooden bench creaking slightly under her. Her gaze didn't leave his hands. Do you worship them? She asked. He shook his head. Not even close. But you should, she said. They are the proof that you are creators. In that moment, he felt something strange, not pride, not awe, but something deeper. A quiet reclaiming. As if her recognition had redefined something he'd taken for granted. His hands had always been tools. But now they were testaments. She pulled away slowly. If we had hands like yours, we would have become gods, she said. But instead, we became observers. He swallowed hard. And it was there, under the afternoon sun and the smell of metal and soil, that something shifted, not just in their understanding of each other, but in the very axis of perspective. She had come from a world of purity, of unblemished function. But here, in his bruised knuckles and crooked scars, she had seen something that transcended technology. Not perfection, but intention. Not design, but devotion. Not cleanliness, but contact. And perhaps that, above all, is why they come, not for answers, not for control, but to remember something they lost the moment they chose progress over pain, efficiency over effort, and cleanliness over the sacred mess that lives inside the human touch. The first time it happened, it wasn't an embrace, or a word, or a glance. It was a pause. A stillness so raw that time itself seemed to tilt toward it. The wind had dropped. The insects had gone quiet. The light of early evening stained the walls of the farmhouse in amber and shadow, and Liam found himself standing beside her in the kitchen doorway, neither of them speaking, yet both acutely aware that something in the space between them had changed. She reached for a glass of water, and their hands touched not with purpose, but with proximity. Skin met skin, and for the briefest moment, the temperature of the room shifted. A static charge. A throb. Not electrical. Not magnetic. Something older. And she froze. "I am affected," she said quietly. Liam blinked. "By what?" "This sensation," she said, pulling her hand back slowly. "It is not discomfort. It is not fear. It is something I have no word for. It moves inward, but it was caused by you." He didn't reply. Couldn't. Her tone wasn't flirtatious. It was clinical but cracking. There was a slight tremor beneath it, like a perfect machine beginning to rust. That night, as they sat on the porch, silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was thick with implication. She was seated closer than usual, not by design, but by drift subtle movements bringing knees almost to touch, shoulders sharing breath. The stars above blinked, unmoved. But below, something stirred. "There is a pattern forming," she said, eyes on the sky. "When I am near you, my equilibrium shifts. When you speak, my thought cadence accelerates. My neural temperature fluctuates in ways that are destabilizing." Liam looked over. "You're saying I mess with your head?" "I am saying," she answered slowly, "that what began as curiosity has evolved into a state I cannot explain with logic." And there it was. The line crossed not with intent, but by gravity. The gravity of something ancient. Something neither of them had a name for. As a researcher, I've spent decades examining alien contact cases where the interaction transcends the physical. In many CE4 and CE5 reports, especially in the Antonio Villas-Boas and Peter Cowrie cases, there are moments where the entities begin to exhibit behaviors that seem emotional. They mimic affection. They express longing. They linger. It's not seduction, it's confusion. As if encountering emotion for the first time leaves them not empowered, but exposed. Rihanna's confession was not romantic. It was existential. She wasn't falling in love, she was falling into perception. She had studied Liam's physiology, his home, his tools, his rituals. But now she was studying herself through him. "I do not understand," she said again. "This pull. It burns. It distorts clarity. It compels me toward you without purpose." "That's emotion," Liam said, his voice low. "It doesn't follow rules." "But I was not made for this," she whispered. "I was not designed to feel." He turned to her, surprised by the weight in her voice. "Then maybe you weren't just made. Maybe you've become." Her breath caught a simulated function, or perhaps something deeper. Her eyes, violet and shimmering with unknown frequencies, locked onto his. "If I am becoming," she asked, "what am I becoming?" The question hovered like mist over an open field. And neither of them answered. She stood, pacing slowly in the moonlight now bleeding through the porch rails. Her voice grew quieter. "I do not have a soul," she said. "We do not believe in them. Our kind abandoned that term eons ago. But this sensation, it behaves like one. It remembers what hasn't happened. It mourns what hasn't been lost. It reaches toward you as if, it knows something I do not. Liam stared at her, heart pounding. Not with lust. With something more dangerous, recognition. Maybe love wasn't a language. Maybe it was a frequency. A pulse that crossed species, defied biology, bypassed culture. A resonance. I think you're feeling what we call connection, he said. And if you can feel it, maybe you don't need to be human to be whole. She turned to face him fully now, a single tear, manufactured or miraculous, rolling down her cheek. It shimmered like mercury under starlight. If this is connection, she said softly, then it is the first thing I have ever experienced that feels more infinite than the stars. He stepped toward her, not to touch, but to stand closer. To let her choose the distance. And she didn't move away. In that moment, she was not alien. She was becoming. Not data. Not design. But something with ache. With fire. With longing. And perhaps that is how love begins, not with understanding, but with surrender. Not with definition, but with a single, impossible question echoing through two beings who never meant to meet. Can something that was not meant to feel, learn to want? The sky that night was not just dark, it was infinite. The stars, instead of blinking like distant jewels, felt present, as if they were breathing. The porch where they sat had gone silent long ago, even the insects choosing reverence over rhythm. Rihanna leaned forward, her elbows resting delicately on her knees, the sleeves of Liam's borrowed flannel shirt pushed up just enough to reveal the soft glow of her alien skin underneath, an echo of something celestial pressed into human fabric. They hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. But everything was being said. Liam glanced sideways. Her face was turned upward, unmoving, eyes unfocused, as if reading something in the sky no one else could see. The space between them was not cold, though the night had cooled. It was full, pregnant with an emotion neither of them could translate. Not lust. Not even longing. Something older. Slower. A resonance not made for language. She finally exhaled, not a sigh, but an internal calibration made audible. They are the same stars I knew on Vórah, she said. But from here, they speak differently. Liam nodded, swallowing something in his throat that felt more like surrender than saliva. Maybe because you're not looking at them alone anymore. She turned toward him. Her pupils were wide now, the violet hue dilated into something oceanic. Togetherness, she whispered, modulates perception. And he understood. Not because of logic, but because his own breath had begun to match hers. His heartbeat too. It was happening, the kind of fusion not taught, not willed, but allowed. I do not have the words for what this is, she admitted. You don't need them, he said. I want them, she replied. Because if I cannot name it, I cannot return to it. He paused. You afraid you'll leave? I fear forgetting, she said. Forgetting what I've become. What I'm still becoming. As a researcher, I've interviewed over 300 alien contact experiencers in my lifetime. The ones who stay with me most are not the ones who saw lights or were paralyzed by beams. It's the ones who reported something more intimate, oneness. A dissolving of barriers. A moment where body, identity, and separation vanish, replaced by something that feels like cosmic embrace. But here's the terrifying beauty of it, sometimes it wasn't love. It was trauma mistaken for intimacy. As Dr. David Jacobs' regression studies have shown, abductees often reinterpret fear as connection in order to survive it. And that raises the question, is it possible to love what you fear, or does fear mimic love too well to tell the difference? Back on the porch, Rihanna reached out not to touch him, but to let her hand hover beside his. Not contact. Invitation. He didn't grab it. He moved his own hand just close enough that he'd passed between them. I feel translucent, she said. As though you are seeing through every layer I was trained to hide. That's what love is, Liam replied, voice low. Letting someone see past what you thought made you safe. Then love, she said slowly, is dangerous. It is, he nodded. But not because it wounds. Because it opens. She didn't speak for a while. The wind moved through the tall grass beyond the barn, hissing like old ghosts trying to listen in. I once believed that connection was a network. Functional. Efficient. That two minds linking would exchange logic and purpose, she whispered. But this is not link. It is leakage. You are inside me now, not through data, but through presence. He looked at her, heart pounding. Do you want that to stop? No, she said, finally turning her hand palm up, her skin glowing faintly in the starlight. I want it to deepen. Even if it breaks me. And he took her hand. It wasn't electric. It wasn't dramatic. But it was complete. Like two ancient signals that had finally found each other after epochs of misalignment. In that moment, he didn't care that she was alien. That her blood wasn't red. That her species saw time in loops, not lines. He didn't care that she had no childhood, no memories of scraped knees or lullabies. Because what she did have now was this, vulnerability. The kind no machine could replicate. And she, in turn, saw in him not simplicity but bravery. The kind of human courage that isn't loud or defiant. The kind that holds out a hand and says, you can stay. Under those foreign stars, they didn't fall in love. They rose into it. Carefully. Slowly. With wonder. With terror. With gratitude for a language they would never fully learn but still chose to speak. The stars that had once loomed above like silent judges now seemed to listen, almost breathing with her. Rihanna stood in the same field where she had first landed, the grass brushing against her legs like 1,000 soft questions. Her craft hovered silently a few feet away, its surface gleaming with the same liquid stillness it had on that first night, unchanged, unmoved by emotion, untouched by the days that had passed. It was waiting. But she was not. Liam stood behind her, not speaking, not pleading. He had learned that love, the real kind, never begs. It only opens the door and waits. I am required to return, she said at last, not turning to face him. My absence is logged. My silence is already being interpreted. I figured, Liam replied quietly. But I will not bring back what they expect. Now she turned, her expression unreadable but glowing from within, as if a decision had ignited some inner system long dormant. I was sent to gather data, she continued. But I will not deliver a report. I will deliver a question. He tilted his head. What kind of question? Can your kind build something greater, she said, not from leverage, but from trust. He walked closer, until the distance between them felt symbolic. That's a hard sell. Most treaties here are signed in ink and fear. Not feeling. And that, she said, is why they fail. As a longtime researcher in xenopolitical theory and speculative contact protocols, I've often envisioned what a real interspecies diplomacy model would look like if it were not framed around technology exchange, mineral rights, or defensive pacts but around something far older: emotional resonance. In our own human history, the most enduring alliances were not those carved by swords or enforced by trade but those sealed through bloodlines, through marriage, through shared breath and beds and myths. Empires that once warred sent daughters to enemy courts not to conquer, but to merge fates. What Vórah was proposing was something even deeper. Not a treaty. Not a federation. But a fusion of perspective. One in which Earth offers not its weapons, not its labor but its heart. Its ability to feel. To hold contradiction. To mourn and still rebuild. She would not bring them charts of agriculture, schematics of plumbing, or samples of bacon grease. She would bring them the sound of a porch creaking beneath tired feet, the scent of soil on a human's hand, the echo of two bodies breathing in time beneath a foreign sky. They will not understand, she said. Liam nodded. Do you? I don't think I need to, she said. I only need to believe it matters. He looked at the ship, then back to her. So what now? She stepped closer, slowly. Her fingers reached out not to touch, but to place something in his hand. A small object. Irregular. Cool. Translucent. It pulsed faintly. What is this? He asked. A resonance anchor, she answered. It will allow me to return not through maps, but through bond. When I hold its twin, I will feel where you are. He stared at it. So, we're connected now. She smiled. We already were. And in that moment, the philosophical became personal. The cosmic became intimate. Between their two worlds, one built on memory, the other on precision, a bridge was being formed. Not with beams. Not with language. But with choice. I will speak to my people, she said. Not as a diplomat. As a witness. To what? He asked. She looked back at the farmhouse. At the worn steps. The window still cracked. The chickens dozing in their coop. She turned back to him and said softly. To something impossible that happened anyway. And then, without drama, without fanfare, the ship opened. She stepped in. It lifted, not violently, not with speed, but with grace, rising like breath, folding itself into the sky until it was no longer visible, yet not gone. In his palm, the object pulsed once. Then once more. Then rested like a heartbeat, learning a new rhythm. And in that rhythm, he knew, between two worlds, one heart can be enough. She came back not in fire, nor with thunder, but in the way a leaf returns to the ground that once held it. No ship lit the sky. No blue light split the field. One morning, Liam opened the barn to feed the goats, and there she stood, covered in dew, hair silver and tangled by the wind, wearing a shirt of his she had left behind. He didn't speak. Neither did she. But the breath he took in that moment was the most real one he had ever known. In the days that followed, there were no announcements. No councils summoned. No world-shaking declarations of interstellar peace. She didn't bring machines or blueprints or strange gifts wrapped in shimmering alloys. Instead, she brought her presence. Her feet in the soil. Her hands learning to knead dough. Her eyes watching storms roll in like memories of another lifetime. And over time, something unspoken solidified, not an agreement, but a becoming. She stopped documenting. Stopped dissecting. Stopped asking what things were for. She began simply living them. The way one lives sunrise. Or the ache of muscle after work. Or silence shared in a bed that no longer feels cold. One evening, they sat near the fireplace, the logs crackling with gentle defiance. Her hand traced the edge of an old photograph on the mantel. Liam as a boy, a dog at his feet, dirt smudged across his face like a forgotten blessing. She turned to him. "I used to think knowledge was found in orbitals," she said. "In layers of code. In structured thought. And now?" he asked. She leaned closer. "Now I think, knowledge is how your voice drops when you say my name in the dark." He didn't reply, because nothing he could say would reach the simplicity of that truth. As a researcher who has spent decades immersed in the mythos and mechanics of alien contact, I find myself humbled by a paradox. For all our telescopes, our probes, our SETI signals screaming into voids, what if the signal that matters most is sent not through radio but through presence? What if the greatest discovery isn't about finding new life, but about becoming worthy of being found? Science fiction, at its core, has never been about spaceships. It's about distance and our desire to cross it. Between stars. Between minds. Between selves. And here, in this quiet farmhouse at the edge of nowhere, a being from another system discovered not our technology, nor our genius, nor our capacity to destroy, but our most fragile, human truth. We want to be seen. Not analyzed. Known. And she chose to stay. Not to collect. Not to conquer. Not even to study. But to transform. To become something earthborn. Not by biology, but by resonance. Her people never arrived to retrieve her. Or if they did, they didn't interrupt. Perhaps they, too, were listening. Waiting. Learning. Perhaps they understood that some journeys cannot be measured in light years but in heartbeats. She now planted with him. Ate with him. Fought and forgave. Stared at the ceiling when sleep refused to come, whispering stories of Vórah like lullabies that only he could hear. And in those stories, he caught glimpses not of alien superiority but of longing. A longing that matched his own. And that's when it became clear, their meeting wasn't chance. It was convergence. Not of mission and subject but of two incomplete truths seeking one another across cosmic silence. There was a moment weeks later when she stood at the edge of the field again, watching the stars. Liam joined her. She didn't turn this time. She only said, "I am no longer a visitor." He nodded. "You're home." And somewhere, in the unmeasured distance between their atoms, a new kind of orbit was born. Not gravitational. Not political. But emotional. So maybe, just maybe, the greatest alien discovery isn't technology, or propulsion, or time-folding engines. Maybe it's us, our cracked hands, our stubborn hearts, our flawed tenderness. Maybe we are the signal. The answer. The myth another species told themselves to justify coming this far. And if that's true, then what we call first contact isn't the beginning. It's the moment we finally became worth meeting. She didn't return to her planet. Not because Earth was more advanced. But because Earth was more alive. No treaty. No orders. No grand farewell. Just a quiet choice beneath the stars. To stay. To become. To be human, by learning how to feel. Because maybe the greatest frontier isn't out there among the stars. Maybe it's right here in our broken homes, in our calloused hands. In the silent spaces between two people who were never meant to meet. But met anyway. Let me ask you. Sparkles, which moment in this story made you pause? Sparkles, if you were Liam, would you let her go, or ask her to stay? Sparkles, and what would you show an alien about what it means to love like a human? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feelings might be the next transmission in the Alien Storyverse. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel. Because the next contact might begin with you.